I am indeed exceedingly excited because we have Brett here.
Thank you.
And I've been lucky enough to know Brett for a very long period of time, but let me tell you a little tiny bit about his background. Brett is, of course, the founder and CEO and president of Bazaarvoice, where he's responsible for guiding the company's strategy. He is the seasoned CEO, having started many companies over the years, and very much a pioneer in the e-commerce innovation space since 1998, almost since before we started thinking about e-commerce in the way we think today, and has been in the online community since 1992. Brett has extensive experience in this online marketing arena, especially as it pertains to e-commerce industry. He founded Core Metrics in February of 1999 after spending 10 years developing internet-based software. Brett helped grow Core Metrics into the leading marketing and analytics solution for the e-commerce industry, and Forrester Research rated Core Metrics #1 in the industry. Prior to Core Metrics, Brett was the founder and CEO of Hurt Technology Consulting and Body Matrix, an online retailer of sports nutrition products. Before that, he's a consultant at Deloitte Consulting and Anderson Consulting, now Accenture. Brett has more than 15 years of internet programming experience and has developed multiple software applications, including internet marketing analysis solutions, e-commerce platforms, web-based classroom management applications, virtual communities, multiplayer online games, and bulletin board system software. He started programming when he was 7 years old, launched a bulletin board software system on a 110 baud modem. Boy, that must have gone really fast. When he was just 10, and created one of the first internet-based multiplayer games in 1990. Brett holds a master's degree in business administration and high-tech entrepreneurship from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and a bachelor's degree in the business administration in management information systems from our own institution, UT Austin. Brett is an entrepreneur who's empowered many, many groups, including Rise's Serial Entrepreneur of the Year in 2002. He's received Austin Entrepreneurs Foundation Community Leadership Award. He was named Entrepreneur of the Year for Austin in 2009 and is a member of the Austin chapter of the International Young Presidents Association. He proudly serves 3 terms over 6 years on the board of directors of Shop.org, the leading not-for-profit industry association for retailers and a division of the National Retail Federation, the largest trade organization of its kind for retailers in the US. He serves as an entrepreneur in residence at the Wharton School and as an inventor with patents to his name, and presents at various industry events, including university events like tonight. He is a passionate individual speaking on and interviewing with other CEOs and how company culture drives performance. So Brett, thanks so much for being here tonight. We would like to make tonight quite interactive because this is about you, not about us. But I'd like to kick off with a few questions. Brett, you were a system engineer before you went back to Wharton and then got an MBA in high-tech entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And you came out of Wharton and said, what am I going to do with this? What made you start a company?
So I actually wrote all of my application essays to get into Wharton on starting my own business. I was lucky enough, I guess you would say, to be born of parents who were entrepreneurs. They were lifestyle entrepreneurs, which is different than my form of entrepreneurship. That means that they did it for the lifestyle, just to be clear, and they did it so that they could spend a lot of time raising us as kids. And my mom actually was the one that got me into programming when I was 7 years old. She went to UT, majored in mathematics. My grandfather taught mathematics here for 35 years. And they together bought me my first computer and got me into that. And you could say that really my whole entrepreneurial career has been bringing disruptive technology to retail. It'd be kind of a great way to summarize it. So I grew up in a retail environment, watching my parents, working in their stores. I started programming early, and I blended the two backgrounds, and I'm really passionate about it. And I think we're in the most exciting time in the history of commerce right now, with social, mobile, e-commerce, all of these things colliding. You could even throw in big data if you want to throw in another buzzword of the day in there. But I think this is a profound time. And so when I was at Wharton, I knew that that was why I was there. I was there to start a business. And the first business that I ever started was one where at Deloitte and Touche Consulting Group, I was making around $35,000 a year out of undergrad, and they were billing me out at around $250 an hour. And I thought, if they can bill me out at that, I can probably bill myself out at that. And so my first business was a consulting firm where I made $250 to $350 an hour. And that got me on my feet to realize that I could be self-sufficient. And that then got me in a mode of thinking, and I did very well with that consulting business and built to employ Wharton undergrads at the time, was an affiliate at the time, to do a lot of the work and would build them out. And I wasn't quite as big of a spread as Deloitte and Touche Consulting Group. I'd pay them about a third what I was billing them out instead of around an eighth. And I realized that from that point on, no matter what business I started, that was my safety net, that I could be self-sufficient. And that is one of the best ways, by the way, to start as an entrepreneur, is to realize that you can bill out your own time. The problem is that doesn't scale very well. You could build a business over a lifetime like that and not even build an Accenture. Those businesses trade about 1 or 2 times revenue and get bought for around that, unless they're growing really fast and maybe you sell them for 3 times revenue. So it's a great way to get started and prove to yourself that you can be an entrepreneur, but it's not a great business if you're trying to hit a home run and change the world. But it's a great way to start.
So core metrics came after the MBA.
Yes.
Why core metrics? You had this retail background, you saw
Sure.
the internet space. Why particularly that idea? How did you come up with it?
So again, my journey kind of started as a kid, and in a way, starting programming and being in retail. So I wanted to get my hands dirty, and I launched my own online store. And I did it by building my own software. And that way I had complete control over it. And it was fascinating. We're actually, we're a Jewish family, and I remember how proud it was for us to be on the front page of the Philadelphia Jewish newspaper, selling to the world. This was 1998, and then I realized how many of my professors were Jewish at the time too, because so many of my professors came out of the woodwork, said, "Oh man, that's so cool," and it was just fascinating that here with this little website selling like power bars and things like that I could sell to someone in London, I could sell to people in the military. I remember getting our first orders from people in the military and shipping to these bases, and my parents were always landlocked, right? They were always retail entrepreneurs here in Austin, and so they're always landlocked, and they wouldn't be selling, maybe they would be visiting, someone would be visiting for a vacation, but they wouldn't be shipping furniture all over the world. And I thought, gosh, this is so cool. And then like my parents, I wanted to know what people were doing inside this store. And the problem with selling online is that everything is masked by a browser. You can't touch or feel anything. You can't interact with people. Nobody's there. It's just a screen. And so I started building my own analytics to realize what people are doing inside this online store. How do they navigate the store? Where do they come in from? And that led to building core metrics, because I built those analytics to run my own business, and through the use of analytics and personalization, I was able to double my online sales and double my conversion ratio from around 2% to around 3.7%. And I realized that this is very powerful, and you could build a bigger brain than you would ever have in a store. Because my parents, they believed in personal service, and of course we could ask people, how did you hear about us, and was it the yellow pages, or et cetera, and you could watch how people navigate. But now you could do this for everybody that ever visited any time of night, 24/7, pulled all that together, pull patterns out of it, and that was the birth of the web analytics industry. And the biggest beneficiary of all, by the way, for Coremetrics was Google, because we actually came before Google, and we had laid the foundation for all of these stores, like Neiman Marcus and Walmart, and stores all over the world, to measure everything that was happening. And I was quoted back then as saying, in an age where you can know exactly how effective your marketing is, and I would remind people of John Wanamaker, who was the original Philadelphia merchant, and he said, half my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half. That's a Philadelphia quote. You may have heard that before, if any of you have studied advertising. I'd say, I'm going to tell you which half for the first time in history. And when you know which half, you'll spend in a near infinite way, because it's always working. Google came along with the best real-time yellow pages in the entire world, with a dynamic bidding system. And if you understand supply and demand, they launched, it worked. Our clients back then made 700% ROI on paid search, and the market very quickly reached equilibrium, and Google became one of the fastest growing companies in history. So that was an outcome of starting Coremetrics.
And the lessons you learned, is there a particular lesson you learned from that particular experience?
Well, Coremetrics was, one of the riskiest things you can do is invest in a first-time entrepreneur. And I want to be clear here, that doesn't mean I think you should not start a business, okay? I'm very much an entrepreneur. I've started 5 businesses. But there's so many things you have to learn, and there's nothing that can prepare you for it. I was obsessive about reading books. I read hundreds of books on management and leadership in the first 2 years of Coremetrics. Obsessive about it. And this was after I graduated Wharton, where a lot of my peers at Wharton felt like, hey, I've learned it all. And I thought, no, Wharton is actually the start of my business education, not the end. And I'll always be a lifelong student of leadership. And I'm learning a lot right now about how to be a public company CEO. And I've got great mentors, people like Tom Meredith, who's our chairman of the board. And so, the biggest lesson learned out of Coremetrics was how to properly use capital. And we started the business in 1999. And we got capital so fast. We raised $15 million like that. It was in the dot-com heyday. My wife and I were living in San Francisco at the time. Everybody was making tons of money. Everybody said, hey, if you continue to spend money like this company is going to be worth $1 billion. Those were my mentors at the time, people that were billionaires that were telling me this. And the reality was that we didn't have the revenues even close to be spending the money that we were spending. It was all betting on the come. And that's what everybody was doing back then. And it happened in Austin with things like living.com and furniture.com. And there were lots of things that went bust in Austin during the dot-com heyday. Well, the Valley was the tip of the spear for that, because they've had decades more of the ripple effect of entrepreneurship than we have here. And boy, when it hit really hard. And I had to face a whole different level of humility than I'd ever had before, as we lost almost every single one of our clients. We had about 100 dot-com clients when it really started to unravel. The dot-com bust occurred, and that went down to 3. And I had to let go more than half of our people. It was one of the worst days of my life. And we had to rebuild from there. And I remember one night thinking, wow, I don't know if we're going to make payroll. Mm-hmm. And I was talking with my wife, Deborah, about it. I've been married 16 years. She's an amazing partner. I would not be nearly what I am today without her. And I was talking with her, and I remember falling asleep that night at peace, as I thought, no matter what happens, I'm going to pick myself back up and I'm going to do it again. And that gave me a level of peace. And we pulled through and we created a big company. It sold for $300 million to IBM later on, became number one rated in the industry. But those were some really, really hard years. It's 4 years of really tough years. So contrast that with Bazaarvoice. So Bazaarvoice, I was hell-bent with my co-founder, Brant, to say we're going to manage capital really, really carefully here. And when we went public in February, the company had around 12 million in the bank with over 100 million revenue run rate, and we had raised $24 million. Today the company has over $140 million in the bank, but it's because we've done an IPO and then we did a follow-on offering. But that's pretty unheard of in software as a service. Most software as a service companies that get to about 100 million revenue run rate use around $60, $80 million of capital to get to that point. And being capital efficient like that creates a better company culture. It creates one of a lot more discipline. And it creates one of a lot more ownership. And that creates the economic ripples that now you're starting to see play out with Bazaarvoice, where you see some people leave to go start their companies. Some people have left a couple of years ago, like Sam Decker, to start his company, Mass Relevance. Garrett, who's in the audience, left about a year ago to start his company, and something I think is very interesting. And so that creates jobs. And one of the things you may not realize, and I know we need to get back on topic, is that somewhere around 90% of our job creation in America, and this is not a political statement, this is just a fact, somewhere around 90% of our job creation in America comes from fast-growing small companies. Why? Because fast-growing small companies are not nearly as focused on efficiency as large companies. Large companies have, and we're not a large company, by the way, Bazaarvoice, but we have about 1,000 people, but I wouldn't say that's a large company. A large company is like 10,000, 100,000 people. Those companies are focused on squeezing out just a little bit of extra margin. It's a really big day if you can get like 0.25% better on gross margin, a really big year. And that comes with productivity, and that doesn't come with creating a lot of jobs. That's a big focus on productivity. And that's a natural arc of companies. So almost all the growth comes from the small business. And I'm very proud of the fact, by the way, that we created over 1,000 jobs here.
But Brett, you created 1,000 jobs since March 2005 when Bazaarvoice.
Yes, that's right.
That's an enormous scaling issue. What do you attribute your ability to scale a business that fast when so few entrepreneurs are able to scale a business at quite that speed?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly it's not like the fastest scaling by any stretch, like Groupon and Google and Facebook have been much faster scaling. But what I can say I would attribute it to is really focusing on the foundation. And if I stack ranked everything we've done culturally speaking, and we're rated one of the best places to work in Austin, and now one of the best places to work in London, if I stack ranked everything we've done, number one at my list would be how we've hired. And there's a reason, if you've ever looked at our culture page, why passion is number one, is actually at the top. We are trying to hire people that want to change the world with us. The mission statement of the company is changing the world one authentic conversation at a time. And we see a profound level of change that we're driving for our clients and for consumers and for brands. And we want to hire people that are really passionate about that, and we've obsessed about that since the beginning, because we really want to make our work count. You only live once. We're going to spend most of our waking time at work. That's just a fact. And you really want to spend it in a meaningful way. And so we've started the company with that focus, and the way that we've made that operational, so how we hired the best, is we put them through a really intense process. And everybody we've hired has been tested. And it goes something like this. So we do around 6 to 8 interviews. We get to our finalist. That's where most companies would check references and hire the person. We call them up, typically on a Friday. And let's just say you're a sales candidate. We say, congratulations. Everybody at Bazaarvoice you've met with wants to hire you. It's almost impossible to get to this point. You should feel great about it. We're all really excited about you. There's just one more thing we need you to do. We need you to come in on Monday, present to us like we're a prospect. You have 45 minutes to present, 15 minutes for Q&A. We need to stay enrolled the whole time. You build the deck from scratch. And by the way, we suggest you take this seriously because over 50% of people fail this part. Now, the right person will spend around 12 to 16 hours over the weekend doing that. But I would pose to you that people really don't know what they're passionate about. There's a lot of romance in dreaming about what you're passionate about. But you really don't know until you're put in the test. You really don't know how you'll behave and perform until you're put to some test. And I can tell you, I worked very hard to get into the warden school to get my MBA. It was one of the most intense processes I've ever been through. And I want to hire those people that'll go for it. And I've had people come in that were #1 performers in their company that spent 4 hours on the test. And you always wonder if they were #1, was it the environment? You know, was it really the sales engineer that did all the work, or was the market just super hot? You always wonder, like, was it really them? Let's forget about was it really them. They put 4 hours into it, where everybody else who was competing against them put 12 to 16 hours. I want to hire that person. I want to hire the person that wants to change the world. And they're going to naturally go for it if they do. And I would pose to you that one of the most important entrepreneurial lessons I can pass to you is find truly what makes you passionate. And you'll know because you'll study it obsessively. You'll read the books about it. You'll read the magazines about it. You'll go to the conferences about it. You'll pick up the phone and be bold enough to call people that have been in that industry. You'll be unafraid to approach people and really go for it. And that is so important. I cannot tell you the number of people that are friends of mine that are not truly happy with their career and are doing it for money. And that's very sad because you only live once. And unfortunately, I've lost both my parents now at the age of 40. My mom passed away this year due to lung cancer, and that puts an even bigger exclamation mark on it for me. But you just never know. You know, my grandparents lived to be very old, and I always thought my parents were going to be there. So, you know, life's too short. Do something you really want to do, and you'll know it when you see it. I want to hire people that want to really do this.
That's obvious.
And they helped it scale.
They helped.
That's the answer to your question, is that they were so passionate that they figured out a way. Of course, we had to hire experienced people too,
Right.
but that's obvious.
But you've also built a unique culture within the company too, that
Yeah,
fosters itself and goes on with the entrepreneurs that have spun off from Bazaarvoice.
Probably like 10 now, but there will be a lot more. There will be a lot more, and you know, one company that we should all be completely praising is Dell, because the economic ripples that Dell has created are so profound. I would say thousands of companies have started coming out of Dell. It's responsible for the whole JCC campus. Mort Topfer, gave, the Hillel we have here. He just built the new Zach Theater. They built the Long Center, Kevin Rollins, and the ripples are massive. Capitalism, by far, is the best force for good, by far. For some reason, in this country, I don't know exactly why, we've forgotten that if you create a company with a strong soul and really with intention to give back to the community, we all have to figure out a way to spend our time on this earth, and most of it's working, right? And capitalism organizes people for good. It can be evil too, right? There's evil and there's good and evil in everything. But if you start a company with a strong soul and you nourish the soul of the company, it can be the greatest force for good. It can do amazing things. I mean, there's so many nonprofits that have started coming out of Dell.
But I'd like to bring you back.
Have trouble counting them.
I'd like to bring you back to Bazaarvoice.
Yes.
I hear a story that's not widely known, that just before you went public, by the way, just 7 years later, for over $1 billion earlier this year, some staff came to you and said they wanted to do more with the Bazaarvoice Foundation. And I hear from friends that you personally gave the foundation more stock to make sure that message of giving back was permeated through the culture of the company.
Yeah, so there's several things. So the Bazaarvoice Foundation, very important, is actually led by people in the company. It's not tops down. That would not be authentic. It's not, hey, you better invest in Brett's cause. It's grassroots, and they organize events, and we have nonprofit CEOs come in and speak. And you want to talk about passionate people, you get a nonprofit CEO come in and speak. They're very passionate. It's a very hard job. And so they come up with all these great causes, and we've got really brilliant people, the most talented and smart people I've ever worked with in my life. And I knew that they would do great things with capital, and so I donated around $1 million of my own equity to the Bazaarvoice Foundation. But we also, Tom Meredith and I, Tom is the chairman of our board, and probably many of you know who Tom Meredith is. He was the CFO of Dell. He's another example of the impact Dell had. Tom and I collaborated on setting up a very large amount of warrants that we could gift to the Bazaarvoice Foundation, and they could use it to monetize. And the intent is to hopefully create a foundation that becomes self-sustaining. That's the intent. We'll see whether or not we figured that out, but that's the intent. And it's very, there's some things you can do that are really bad, and really, there's some things you can do that are terminal for a company, obviously. But there's some things you can do that are good, but you don't know how good they are in the moment. But 10 years later, you'll look back on it. So let's just say that Bazaarvoice becomes a company with $1 billion in revenue one day. Right now, we're a public company, so our guidance is 153 to 156 million of revenue. That's what we reported last quarter. So let's just say that we could hit $1 billion. Well, the ripple effects that would create in terms of what that stock could be worth in the Bazaarvoice Foundation, how much wealth that would create for the employees that are in an environment where we've really focused on nourishing the soul, how many startups that create would be amazing. And so that decision to do that right before we went public on our board of directors, which Tom and I got support for with the rest of the board, may turn out to be one of the best decisions, because when most companies give, like even when Dell, the company, gives today, they have to give out of OpEx. And there's a lot of pressure on that. It's much better if you can give out of a foundation. And we just hired an executive director for our foundation, whose name is Kelly Ballard, who is on the Dell Social Initiative. So she reported to Susie Sosa, and Tom Meredith and Susie just say she's amazing. So I'm really excited to see what Kelly will ultimately do with the foundation and how she'll organize us and make it even more grassroots and even more exciting.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one other question, but in the meantime, if any of you have questions, if you could make your way to one of the microphones, we'll go to live questions from you after this next one, which is, Brett, since you're now a public company, $1 billion in cap, or actually over $1 billion in cap, has it changed the entrepreneurial spirit of the people inside at all, the business?
It really hasn't. I mean, so there is a difference between being the size of company we are today and being a 50-person company. And a friend was asking me this recently and saying, hey, did you have more fun in the company when it was 75 people or more fun in the company now? And I said, I had to think about it for a second as I wanted to give an honest answer. And I said, I can honestly tell you I'm having as much fun as I was then. So I said, let me do a little compare and contrast for you. And this will get directly to your question. So at 75 people, we had very few clients. We had one office here in Austin. We did have a very strong soul and did a lot for community, but we were constrained by the size of the company. It's very small. We had the ability, the whole company was probably that many people, right? And so we could kind of throw a dart and hit someone, and that was everybody in the room. And we could organize really quickly for a celebration. We did our gong. If you've read about our gong ceremonies, we did that ad hoc. Just hit it. Everybody would gather around immediately. And I would talk about how special it was at 75 people. I'd talk about, hey, it's not going to last long, so enjoy this size. And it won't last long because we'll be successful, is what I said. And when we're around that size, we're around, I think, maybe 8 million or so in sales. And I set a goal for us to get to 100 million in sales in like 5 years, and we beat that goal. And people thought it was crazy, like when I set that goal. But I set that goal, and now I've reset that goal to say we're going to go from where we are today to over $1 billion. And so, there was a lot of beauty in smallness. Contrast that to today. We have 9 offices around the world: Austin, San Francisco, New York, London, Paris, Munich, Stockholm, Sydney, and I think I hit 9. I might have missed one. We have almost 2,000 clients. We bought Power Reviews, which was one of our competitors. We've got 450% higher R&D budget in the last year and a half. We've employed a lot more people. We've still maintained our ranking as one of the best places to work in Austin, and now one of the best places to work in London. We do a ton for community. People have gone off to start their own companies, which I actually applaud. I don't denigrate that. It's an awesome activity. And there's so many tribes inside the company. There's the Iron Chef Club, there's the Yoga Tribe, there's P90X, there's Biggest Loser. There's just all these things going on. It's like a campus-like environment. And it's at the size where no matter what your interest is, there's a wakeboarding club, cycling, there's something, and the people are every bit as good as they were then. And you can still get the small thing. Like, if you're in Austin, and this has happened, we've had employees say, I'm going to go do a tour of duty in London for a year and a half, or I'm going to go to Sydney for a year and a half, or I'm going to go to Munich or Paris. None of those were possible. And so, yeah, it's very innovative. It's more innovative by far. It's because we can do more. Is it as entrepreneurial? Yeah, it is. I mean, we've made more announcements about products and solutions for clients in the last year than we've ever made in the company's history. Does it feel different? Is it right for the person that only likes the less than 50-person environment? No, it's not. But the difference is a 50-person environment, you don't know if that company is going to survive or not. And a lot of them don't. And I'm not trying to say don't be an entrepreneur, but it's pretty clear that Bazaarvoice is going to survive and thrive.
I think if you're a great example of an entrepreneur, you're certainly not discouraging this audience. But does anyone have any questions? Please, could you come to the microphone?
And by the way, I just have to comment that I love the fact that I brought my daughter here and she is asleep in the front row. That is classic. So that's a beautiful thing.
Please.
I love you, Rachel.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in your opinion, what does Bazaarvoice have to do to get to $1 billion? What do they have to execute on to get to $1 billion in revenue?
Well, so here's the frustrating thing about our space. The reality about our space is that it is a nascent space. So, you may have seen that Workday just went public and is founded by the founder of PeopleSoft, which was kind of bought in a hostile takeover reported in the media by Oracle. And he's in a replacement market. So he's displacing PeopleSoft's clients and saying, here's the newer, better way to do it. And we're a Workday client, by the way. So here's the newer, the cheaper, faster, better way to do it, software as a service. And that's a force to be reckoned with for the old line enterprise software companies. So Salesforce is the same thing. They were displacing Siebel. In our market, we're creating the market. That could be perceived as harder, and I would pose that it is. So what I continue to remind people of when I'm educating public market investors on our space, or anybody that owns our stock, I continue to remind them that brands that sell through retailers spend $550 billion per year on market research, advertising, and promotions to access consumers in the $12 trillion retail channel globally. And I say some of that $550 billion is going to shift over time. And it's going to shift to digital. And as it shifts in a world where most people read reviews prior to buying a product, which is just a form of word of mouth, by the way. It's the way we've always been wired. The name Bazaarvoice means the voice of the marketplace, and Bazaar is symbolizing ancient. So instead of a Web 2.0 company, which that term doesn't even exist anymore, it's a company that is tapping into an age-old human behavior, word of mouth. So it's going to be somewhere in there. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is the network effect of our business model. The more retailers we win, the more brands we win, the more brands we win, the more retailers we win. And you may want to check out what we announced with Bazaarvoice Connections. It's a very new program, but it's an example of the types of product opportunities that are available in a network effect business model. And I would say that another network effect business model is LinkedIn. And they've aggregated, the majority of the world's professionals. I don't even know anybody that's not on LinkedIn anymore. I'm sure there's someone. Don't hire that person. And so, there's all these derivative revenue streams that can come off a network effect business model, but we've got to figure it out. And that's different than if we were in a replacement market like Workday is. And Workday is an amazing IPO, right? If you read about that. And I think investors look at a company like Workday and say, that's the size of their market. It's how much money PeopleSoft made. And I've heard, I don't know this stat for a fact, but I've heard that only 25 software companies in the world have ever gotten to over $1 billion in revenue. And we would love to be one of those one day.
Sounds like there's more to come on that regard. By the way, if you're on LinkedIn,
Thanks.
Reid Hoffman said that the average person has 170 LinkedIn network nodes or contacts.
Sure.
That will lead you to $2.2 million, network nodes that you can actually get to. Fairly phenomenal from what you've said.
And the world's population is 7 billion, and those are probably the 2.2 billion that work.
That work, absolutely. Yep.
So never stop asking questions, Brett.
I'm on his network, by the way. I want you to know. It works.
Sorry, what? Oh, my
We're
apologies.
Facebook buddies too. We're
Yes.
like BFFs.
So when I came to Austin, I was one of the few people that left the Bay Area. It was kind of like there was many people coming to Silicon Valley for the wide open field of consumer and whatnot, and I chose Austin because of the strong B2B and kind of enterprise environment here. Now, given that a lot of these are students here, and people are thinking about you're encouraging to go start companies, what's your advice on considering between like a B2C versus B2B, given that B2B is not sexy, it's hard,
Right.
it's but at the same time, more companies end up billion-dollar companies in the enterprise world than the next Facebook, right?
So it's a very good question. One I think about a lot, actually. So the B2B model is an easier model, and it's actually becoming sexy again. By the way, that's what I've heard in Silicon Valley. Is because Zynga's down.
Aaron Levy.
Yeah, because some of the B2C IPOs are down. I've heard like B2B is super sexy, and Workday certainly has supported that hypothesis. Right? They've had a phenomenal IPO. So B2B is safer. B2B is picks and shovels. B2C at any scale is gold mining. For every Facebook, well, there's only one Facebook. There's millions of companies that have tried things that have failed. Facebook, by the way, is not the first social network, not even close. There was GeoCities in the past. My bulletin board system when I was 10 years old had, the ability to, write to each other, have all types of friends online. It was a great example of the right time, the right place. The network had reached the tipping point, and Zuckerberg had the right idea at the right time. And Friendster, failed, right after, right? And there's lots of examples of that. Amazon wasn't the first e-commerce site. So B2C is hard if you want to create a big business. My parents were B2C and they want a lifestyle business. That's easy. You can create a lifestyle business in B2C, but if you want to change the world in B2C, it's very, very hard. And it's very hard because you've got to find something that you can build a moat around. And Facebook's built a moat, and LinkedIn's built a moat, and Twitter has built a moat because they reached a tipping point. They reached a scale where it's a massive tipping point. LinkedIn's interesting because it's B2C ultimately to B. They make money from recruiters. Like recruiters, I think, pay $8,000 a year to have premium features and stuff, which is probably cheap considering they can reach almost everybody, so it probably makes their job so much easier and so much more efficient. So I think that Austin's really hard for B2C because there's just less in the melting pot. In Silicon Valley, there are so many more startups. And by the way, this is the most exciting time in the history of Austin for entrepreneurship. There's an amazing number of startups right now. There's a lot of energy in the city, but it pales in comparison to Silicon Valley. And that's not me saying anything negative about Austin. I love Austin. I was born and raised here. I'm staying in Austin. The reason I say that is because Silicon Valley has decades more of the ripple effects. Like, one of my friends visited me from Silicon Valley. He was my first board director at Coremetrics. And he said, Brett, how many companies have gone public in the last 4 years? And I said, well, let me think. In tech, right? I said, well, let me think about that. Us, HomeAway, SolarWinds, and Convio. I was like, one every year.
NetPay?
What's that?
NetPay? Anyways, go on.
What, NetPay?
I was thinking NetPay. There was one last summer. Anyways.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe it's 5, but I mean, and so that's great, actually. That's like a really good time in Austin. And people are coming out of HomeAway to start their own businesses. People are coming out of Bazaarvoice to start their own businesses. people coming out of SolarWinds, people coming out of Convio. Convio was just bought by Blackbaud. And that creates those ripple effects. Well, in Silicon Valley, they just have a lot more ripples, so there's a lot more experimentation, a lot more failure, just raw numbers, and a lot more tries to swing for the fences in B2C. And I think if you want to start a B2C company, you know, your chances of success, just realize, are very, very slim. If you want to hit the ball out of the park. If you just want to create a small company, they're probably very high if you're smart and humble and capable and, you know, ask for a lot of help.
But don't lose your passion, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You should go for it. I mean, you know, John Mackey created Whole Foods here, and it's worth $18 billion today. And one stat I heard recently is that Whole Foods market cap is greater than all public grocery stores combined. That also is true of, at one point, Southwest Airlines, greater than all public airlines combined in terms of market cap. So you can create a home run outside of Silicon Valley. Please don't mistake that.
Absolutely. Next question.
Hi, Brett. Thank you for the time here. Speaking of ripple effects, Bazaarvoice has actually provided 3 of the most dedicated mentors to the startup that me and several UT students are working on.
Yeah, and see, that's so cool because I didn't know about it, and this happens all the time. Like, as I walk the halls of Bazaarvoice, anytime I feel down, and I've got my ebbs and flows too, I walk around and there's so much to be inspired by. There's just so many things that are happening, and that's what I meant by the size. I can't imagine if we had 7,500 people or so, how much even more profound that would feel, but that's neat.
My question was basically, you spoke earlier about a tough time when you had to let half your workforce go, but
yeah, at Core Metrics.
Right.
Yep.
Bazaarvoice was going through an IPO at the same time that you were dealing with a pretty tough personal situation with your mother, and I was wondering if you could talk a bit about balancing, you know, the personal expectations at the same time that, as the face of your company, everybody's looking at you.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that question. So I, since the beginning of the company, have taken 5 to 6 weeks vacation per year, which is very unusual for any American. We're like right there with Korea, I think, in terms of average vacation time. And that's a really important exercise for a leader because the way I do that is I work an hour or 2 on vacation, but I do it at a time where hopefully my family would agree I don't disrupt the family time. And I can say this because Rachel's very tired right now. And so I find that time allows me to recharge, allows me to reflect. Like one of the things actually in Rachel's school, which is so powerful, I don't even think they realize how powerful it is they have this thing called Portfolio Day, where every 6 months, not every 6 months, but twice a year, twice the school year, the children in the class, you know, with the parents and with anybody that wants to watch, presents their work to you and explains what they learned, explains the process, and that forces them to reflect. It's actually the process that I've learned, that to better myself as a leader, I need to constantly seek out mentors, I need to constantly read, I need to constantly have introspection and ask others for feedback, and I've got all types of processes for that, both for me as well as everybody in the company. And so, you know, this reflection time is incredibly important. And it's something that a lot of people don't take the time. They're just kind of run, and they don't take the time to ever pause and go take a walk and reflect. Now, I can tell you, I work very hard. I don't count the number of hours. I think if you're in any job where you count the number of hours, you're probably in the wrong job. But I love it. Like I wake up sometimes at 4:30 in the morning. My mind is racing because I'm so excited about what we're doing at Bazaarvoice. All the the great people, the great initiatives. And so, this time is very important. And one of the biggest reasons I take this time is actually for family, is actually to spend the time with our children. They're only going to be that age once. And I did take a lot of time with my mom going through lung cancer, but thankfully my sister is a realtor here in Austin, one of the best realtors, by the way. And she really is. She's got an incredible work ethic. And she spent so much time with my mom, so much more time. And so she helped me create some of that balance because she had so much more time to spend because her life was designed for lifestyle. Her career, right, was designed more for lifestyle. And thank God she was able to do that. But I was right there with my mom, and Rachel was too, and my mom and my wife Deborah was too. We were all holding her hand when she passed away, and it was one of the most amazing moments. I mean, it was a beautiful moment. It was a tragic moment, but it was a very beautiful moment. I was right there with her as she was taking her last breaths.
Family is important.
Yes, absolutely.
Family is very important. Next question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here.
You
Just
bet,
a quick
thanks.
question. Out of the Austin startups that do have professional funding, which ones do you really like?
I think, well, I mean, honestly, we are always recruiting, and I think we've got a great opportunity. I like Whale Shark a lot. I think that's a very interesting company. I really like Cotter Style. It's got a real down-to-earth style. When they go public, it's going to be really interesting because he's got such a folksy, down-to-earth style that I think that Wall Street's not going to know what to do because he's just disarming. He's just an amazing guy, and he'll do very well. I like Sam Decker's company, our previous CMO, Mass Relevance. I like what Garrett's doing. There's so many things going on. I mean, and there's so many events you could go to, like Capital Factory. You could go to Capital Factory events and find out what they're up to. It's not hard. That actually is one thing that Austin has big time over Silicon Valley is it's not hard to navigate. And it's very, very giving. Like, part of the reason I moved back here is that the people are so generous, like the spirit's so generous with their time and connecting you. It's a real easy city, actually, to be successful in because people, when Amy of Amy's Ice Cream looked all over the nation for where to locate her ice cream shop, she picked Austin because when she came down here, she met with other entrepreneurs. You may know this story. And they just would say, here's my financials. Just what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything about how to run a business here. And she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't visit any other city like this. So it's real easy to find. It's real hard to find something that's going to be successful, though. And that's, that's like, Bazaarvoice is 500% larger than I thought it'd be by this point in time. So, by the way, that still means it would have been successful. A fit this size would have been successful. But you're better off if you go with an experienced entrepreneur, unless you're ready for a wild ride, and you may hit. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, that was his first company. That's like hitting the jackpot, a million times in a row. I had to do the math on that.
Thank you for the question.
Just to make sure, because I was thinking billion, that's $1,000 million. I think I did the math on that right.
We're going to have these last two quick questions, and then we're going to close off, so if we can make them brief.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20 and about to graduate college?
I'm sorry, the question is, what do I know now that I wish I had known when I was... I need to really think about that. You know, I guess the art of, you know, things can wait till tomorrow. So what I mean by that is, like, I was obsessive, you know, when I was younger, about having an email inbox with everything read. You know, I didn't hardly ever take time. I just worked and worked and worked and worked. And you know, my wife and I, she actually helped me start Core Metrics, and we were 26 years old, and we would work till midnight every night, including weekends. And I didn't take enough time to reflect. And we hit a wall. And maybe if I'd taken the time to reflect and step back and just look at things objectively, I wouldn't have hit that wall. And I think that that's, you know, there's a very simple book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, which says when you die, your inbox is full. And it's true. I mean, so, you know, and it just doesn't matter. So I guess what I'd say is, like, being able to not be so obsessive about things and let things kind of slide off. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be passionate and work hard. I actually think that before you have kids, before you're married, you should invest like crazy in your career. You really should. But just take the moment sometimes to pause, seek out mentorship, recharge, and realize that life is a beautiful journey and it doesn't have to be a race.
Thank you. And the last question for the night?
So my question for you is, senior executives in privately held companies in Austin are generally paid less than executives in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see wages going up to attract that talent?
So I'm not sure that that's actually true anymore. I'm really not. Like, I can tell you that we now have a San Francisco office because we acquired Power Reviews. We now have a New York office that we opened up at the beginning of the year. And I can honestly tell you that they make around the same as our people in Austin do. There may be a 10% differential, but that's not even close to the cost of living difference between the offices. Austin has gotten very competitive for top talent, and so I'm not really sure that's true anymore. Now, you know, there are all these false positives and false negatives in life, and so there have been people that have left Bazaarvoice at times. This isn't a big trend at all over the years, but, you know, one or two people who got nabbed by Dell, and Dell paid them twice as much as they were making at Bazaarvoice. But Dell's like, you know, think about the size difference of the companies here. And you know, frankly, they made the wrong decision because they would have made a lot more money on the equity had they just stayed. For sure. I mean, they really would have. That's just a fact. And so, you know, short term versus long term. I have a lot of friends who went short term into investment banking, coming out of Wharton, say, I'm just going to work for a couple of years, I'm going to make a lot of money, and then I'm going to have the discipline to step out of it because I know I'm going to hate it. They're still working there, and they're miserable. Their lifestyles have adapted to that salary, that income. And that is what happens to most people, because very few people in this world have the discipline to do, you know, to really stick with something, to start a company, to stick to an exercise program, to stick to a diet, etc. It's just, it's very few people have that, and there's all these self-help books and everything else. And I think you should, you know, be different, right? Be someone that actually sticks to something, actually follows through, And I can tell you, starting a company, I mean, even with Bazaarvoice, there's been some dark moments in the past for this company. I mean, this company went through the Great Recession. So, you know, hopefully that, I know that was a meandering answer, but hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last short word for the night, for the entrepreneurs in the audience, for the aspiring entrepreneurs to be. If there's one word of wisdom you might leave with them before we metaphorically ring our gong and go outside and network, what would that be?
So, I mean, you know, if you really want to start your own business, and it's your first business, you better surround yourself with more experienced people, number one. If you're really kind of, I really want to do it, but I know I need more experience, the best thing you can do is go work for a company that is young and is growing fast. Because if you work for a company that's young and growing fast, you will take on a lot of responsibility very quickly. And an example of that is that if you look at some of our people who've been here for 6 years, and we're only a 7.5-year-old company, they've already been in like 4 or 5 jobs. At a company that's growing at like 5%, you fall asleep. It's just nothing's going to change that fast. You're not going to get that much responsibility change. Your career path could be you're in the same job for 5 years, and just like anything, like whether it's exercise or you're studying a new language or whatever, you need to have the ability to practice. And if you want to have a successful career as an entrepreneur, get an environment where you can practice, where you can have more reps, right? Where you can practice faster. It can stretch you much more than if you were in a slow growth type environment. It's very hard to find, by the way, because some things that look like they're going to grow fast don't grow that fast. But I would say just, the majority of people are probably better off going to work at a young company that's growing fast and then start their next business. And that, by default, will de-risk. But, if you're the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Ben Silverman, who started Pinterest or something, more power to you. And those, and there are those people out there, and nobody should tell you can't do it. And Mark Zuckerberg went out and hired Sheryl Sandberg and hired people that are much more experienced, and those people are amazing. I mean, Sheryl's an amazing woman, an amazing force. So it can be done, but you're probably better off going and getting, an apprenticeship, if you will, and then going and doing it on your own.
Would you all join me in thanking Brett Hurt for a fabulous evening?
Thank you.